An entity not of this world dragged me backward through time, ripping apart the fake velvet curtain of history. He threw me down right in front of the true architects, the Anunnaki. And the truth about Egypt, he exposed, will not just silence you. It will make the blood in your veins boil with rage. Forget the lifeless stone blocks. What we are looking at is a user manual. The legacy of a highly advanced civilization stripped from humanity's grasp. We have been robbed in broad daylight. The history taught in schools, just a sedative, a thick smokescreen erected to hide a horrifying truth. The pyramids were never tombs for rotting corpses. They are machines. They were built to activate the living. You are about to embark on a journey to discover the true function of these impossible structures. Why do they exist? And more importantly, what the hell happens to your biological structure when you step into their energy fields? The question is, what will you do when you realize humanity's most powerful weapon has been hidden right in plain sight, camouflaged as tourist rocks? If you have the guts to face the truth about who built the pyramids and the ultimate purpose of Egypt, join these ranks immediately. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Don't miss the signal. And if you really want to tear off this mortal shell, touch the divine origin, and co-create reality, the weapon for the awakening of this species, then the roadmap lies in the pinned comment. The ebook, Reconnecting with Your Divine Essence, is not for the faint-hearted. It is for those ready to shatter the chains of perception. Because what I am about to reveal will completely overturn the definition of human. Where did it all begin? Dennis Reeves, 58 years old. In the eyes of society, he was a miserable failure. He believed he had thrown his entire life out the window. Not because he was incompetent, but because he had spent 40 long years on something he knew was the truth, yet was denied by the whole world. True Egyptology. Earned his PhD at 26, a genius brain. Spent 20 years dedicated to the most prestigious academic cathedrals and museums, papers, lectures, fame. It was all in his hands. But then everything collapsed in the blink of an eye when Dennis committed a cardinal sin. He dared to question. He dared to challenge the rotten script that academia had prepared. Pyramids are not tombs. Dennis wrote that down. He threw a paper with evidence as hard as cold steel right in the face of academia. The astronomical alignment was too perfect to be absurd. It couldn't be random. Not a single original mummy had ever been found in the Great Pyramids. Ancient hieroglyphic texts. They never mentioned burial or funerals. They only screamed about one thing: transformation, rebirth, ascension. But what did academia do? They didn't debate. They laughed. They systematically ridiculed him like a pack of hyenas attacking an old lion. Colleagues who once bowed in respect now turned their backs, treating him like a leper. Conference invitations dried up. Finally, the university doors slammed in his face. Forced into early retirement, a soft but brutal purge. Denny, the name the few remaining friends called him, drifted to Tempe, Arizona. He lived in seclusion, far from the fake academic world that had spat on his life's work. Living on a meager pension and occasional online consulting gigs. But there was a fire in this man's eyes that never went out. He never abandoned his core belief. There is a great secret lying there, deeper, darker, and mightier than anything humanity is allowed to know. The pyramids are not just stone. They are massive hard drives housing data that humanity is desperately seeking, but was too stupid to remember. And what was the universe's cruelest joke on Dennis? A lifetime dedicated to Egypt, yet he had never once breathed its air. It wasn't for lack of passion. It was because of the naked reality of human existence. poverty, a destitute youth, a middle age crushed by debt, children, bills. And now, retired, he was shackled by an empty wallet. Egypt remained a luxury dream, a promised land he was only allowed to view through a screen. Thousands of photos had been analyzed by his brain down to the pixel. Every map, every ancient text resided in his head. But he had never felt the heat of the desert sand under his boot heels, never touched the multi-ton stone blocks cut with that impossible technology. This tormented him. It made him feel like a brilliant general who had never stepped onto the battlefield, a surgeon who only practiced on dummies. Thursday night, late November. Tempeh was still simmering like a furnace. Dennis sat alone in the cramped room. His wife was visiting their daughter in Phoenix. On the TV screen, a new documentary about the pyramids was airing, another damn algorithm recommendation. And he sat there, watching with disappointment turning into explosive rage. Still the same old lies regurgitated for the last 40 years. Pharaoh's tombs, slave labor dragging stones, sand ramps. All garbage. These theories violated every basic principle of mathematics and logic. Yet academia chanted them repeatedly like a mantra to lull the masses to sleep. Why? Because the alternative truth was too terrifying for their tiny brains. On the screen, a slick expert pointed at the king's chamber. This granite sarcophagus was the resting place of Pharaoh Khufu. "Shut up!" Dennis screamed at the TV, his voice ripping through the silence of the room. "No, never a tomb. You guys never found any body in there. That stone box is the wrong size. Not a single inscription. It follows none of the funeral rules of ancient Egypt. You know that, you coward. You lie because you're afraid the truth will smash your professorship chair, just like it crushed me." He slammed the remote onto the table. The screen went black. Dennis sat panting in the darkness, chest heaving. He was exhausted, not from age, but from the burden of holding the truth in a world that only preferred sweet lies. Then the light appeared, not from the TV, not from a light bulb. It emanated from the corner of the room, right next to the bookshelf stacked with his Egyptian materials. A pale, ghostly green light, swelling like a tumor of reality. Dennis spun around, heart pounding like it wanted to break his ribcage. First thought, stroke, stress-induced hallucination. But no, that light was too dense, too physical. And within that cocoon of light, a form began to solidify, molecule by molecule being rearranged right before his eyes. Tall, distinct, an alien creature, just like in Hollywood movies. But this one was real, not CGI. Smooth grey skin like silk, but tough as steel. A large head housing a brain far beyond humanity. And eyes dark and deep as cosmic black holes. Dennis, frozen in his chair, the analytical brain of a PhD, was screaming, trying to process this impossible event. But then a voice resonated, not through eardrums, but drilled straight into his cerebral cortex. Clear, echoing, and full of authority. "Dennis Reeves, you were right about everything. The pyramids were never tombs. Academia doesn't hide the truth to protect history, Dennis. They hide it because they are terrified. This truth is the key to unlocking the shackles for your entire species. I am not here to show you photos of dead things or hollow theories. I am here to show you that machine when it was operating at full throttle." The initial shock in Dennis gave way to the skepticism of a brain tempered by decades of research. Complex hallucination, extreme stress. Finally, the nerves snapped, but the stubborn ego of a human wouldn't let him stay silent. He screamed into the void, "If you're real, If I'm not crazy, then why did you choose me? A failed paper doctor, an outcast, broke, nobody listens to. Why not the heads of museums or governments? The alien's voice resonated without pity, only cold respect, because you defended the truth when the whole world pointed guns at your head. Those academics, they are obedient sheep rewarded with candy for listening well. But you chose integrity over comfort. In this universe, that stubbornness is a rare resource. The creature continued, tone becoming more urgent. 40 years you loaded data into your head. Your brain is ready. What's missing is the actual experience. I won't take your old carcass anywhere. We will use consciousness, a quantum projection through time. You will see Egypt not through ruins, but through the eyes of those who built it. Anunnaki, Dennis uttered, the heavy word he had seen in Sumerian texts, but never dared to attach to Egypt. You mean those visitors? They created Egypt? The alien nodded, a strangely human gesture. Sumer was just a beta version, a crude experiment. But after the Great Flood wiped everything out, the Anunnaki needed a more stable system. They chose the Nile Valley, not because it was pretty, but because it was a natural energy gateway, an intersection of ley lines, perfectly aligned with key constellations. They didn't build a civilization to grow rice. They built an eternal machine. Dennis listened, as if swallowing every word. Everything started clicking together like the gears of a giant clock. It was a massive mystery school, Dennis. Pyramids are not tombs. They are amplifier technology. The Sphinx is not a statue to look at. It is a firewall, a guardian holding the repository of knowledge. The Nile, that is the cooling system and energy purifier. It was all a blueprint. Nothing was random. Dennis shuddered. Years of being called crazy, having his career stripped away just because he dared to believe in a higher purpose. And now, an entity from space was confirming he had been right from the start. Can you prove it? Dennis's voice trembled, a mix of fear and desire. Not just empty words in my head, right? The creature looked at him, eyes deep black containing galaxies. I will do better than that. I will plug you in. I will throw your consciousness through space-time. You will see Egypt when the pyramids were roaring in operation, when the temples shook with raw energy, when the true initiates underwent genetic modification that your books describe as magic. And if you want, I'll show you modern Egypt too, so you understand why tourists feel chills when touching the stones. It's not the wind. It's residual electricity from a hibernating machine. Even when partially disabled, those machines still leak power. Like a nuclear reactor with a cracked hull, energy still flows out, triggering sensitive individuals who accidentally walk by. Dennis swallowed hard, looking straight into those deep black eyes. And you, who are you? Where are you from? Why do you care about that pile of rubble in Egypt and an old has-been like me? The creature tilted its head, a gesture more analytical than emotional. I am an observer. I share the same star origin as the Anunnaki, but our missions differ. They are engineers. They build, activate, and leave. We are archivists. We record. And when the time is ripe, we hand the keys to species that are ready. He stepped closer to Dennis's bookshelf, long fingers gliding over the spines of thick books. Egypt is their ultimate masterpiece. It is not architecture. It is a complete ascension code, carved into granite to survive millennia of human collective amnesia. And you, Dennis, you spent your life staring at that code without the decryption key. You failed not because you were incompetent, but because you lacked the original data. Today, I come to give you the source code. Your mission is not failure, it is preparation. You will no longer be an outcast Egyptologist. You will become the only witness that academia cannot touch. Dennis looked around his shabby room. Stacks of towering books, yellowed notes from 40 years ago, photos of magnificent structures he had never once set foot in. He thought about his life, a career incinerated for daring to speak the truth, a dream strangled by poverty. And now, an entity from the stars was offering something even the richest billionaire on Earth couldn't buy. Not luxury travel, but total understanding. A surgery of the mind. Dennis clenched his fists, though his fingers were trembling with adrenaline. His voice resonated firm as if nailing into a post. Take me. I want to see its true nature. I want to know why. Why I've been obsessed with it my whole life. The alien glided over, movement smooth as zero gravity. You will see Egypt through 3 layers of reality, Dennis. Etch this into your bones. Layer 1, time 0, when the Anunnaki just pulled the welding torch off the stone blocks, when the machines were brand new and operating at 100% capacity. Layer 2, the Golden Age, when the pharaohs, the initiated ones, held the operation keys. They used that technology like demigods. Layer 3, today, bare ruins, looted, but still vibrating vigorously with residual energy. You will understand that connection throughout. You will feel it in your spinal cord, not just in your brain. He paused, black eyes spiraling deep into Dennis's mind. And upon return, you will no longer be the Dennis Reeves of yesterday. Enlightenment is irreversible, because Egypt will recognize you. You are not a stranger, Dennis. You have been there. In other lifetimes, you were a scribe. You were a priest. Today is not learning something new. Today is data recovery. Ready? Dennis nodded, a nod betting his entire soul. The alien reached out a long finger, cold as dry ice, and touched his forehead lightly. Boom. The room exploded into nothingness. Tempe was wiped out. Arizona vanished. Dennis was no longer standing on the ground. He was in free fall, through space, through time. An extreme sensation of vertigo mixed with the wild euphoria of a soul just escaped from the ribcage. When the vertigo subsided, Dennis found himself floating in mid-air. Beneath his feet lay the Nile Valley, but not the barren, desiccated version he had studied on Google Earth. This was Eden, lush green, overflowing with life. And the pyramids. My God, forget the jagged yellowed ruins of the 21st century. Standing tall before him were flawless masterpieces. They were encased in pristine white Tura limestone, polished to an absurd degree, reflecting the sun like the giant mirrors of gods. Dennis almost screamed, "Look at that capstone." It wasn't broken. It wasn't missing. The pinnacle, the legendary Ben stone, was cast in solid gold. It wasn't just decoration. It was blazing like a cosmic lighthouse, tearing through the sky. Surrounding these titans was not a dead desert, but a metropolis of life. Intricate canals, lush gardens, and people were there, but not just humans. Others walked among the crowd, tall, majestic, giants, 2.5 meters tall with metallic golden skin and large, cold, sharp eyes. They moved with the air of those who owned this planet. Anunnaki. Dennis looked down, and his entire 40 years of knowledge was pulverized in a single second. He saw the construction site. But where? Where were the thousands of bloody, bareback slaves? Where were the stupid sand ramps? Where were the ropes and levers? None. Instead, there was technology. 50-ton limestone blocks were floating, literally. They hovered in the air like balloons, wrapped in energy fields that visibly distorted the light around them. Anunnaki engineers held crystal devices in their hands that emitted specific vibrational frequencies, guiding these massive stones into position with nanometer precision. The guide's voice rang in Dennis's head, carrying the arrogance of a superior civilization. Acoustic levitation. Resonant frequencies cancel local gravity. For the Anunnaki, tossing a 50-ton rock into the sky is as gentle as you holding a flashlight. Dennis's jaw dropped in awe. And that 20-year construction theory of your historians, laughable. We finished this complex in 18 months. 18 months of focused work. That speed is a miracle to humans, but just standard industrial procedure for us. Each block was not placed randomly. They fit together so tightly that not even air could pass through. That was sacred geometry. Mathematical ratios used to trap and amplify cosmic frequencies. Why? Dennis asked in his mind, curiosity overriding fear. Why build something so massive and insanely precise? His vision suddenly accelerated. Time flew by. The pyramids were now complete. The white casing shone blindingly under the midday sun. The golden capstone burned like a second sun ruling over the earth. Dennis looked down from low orbit. The 3 pyramids were not just sitting there. They were aligning. A perfect reflection of Orion's belt. Orion, the alien explained, voice cold. That is home. That is 0 coordinate. And this alignment is not for nostalgia or worship. Don't be naive. It is an antenna. The pyramid is not standing still. It is feeding. On the winter and summer solstices, when the stars align in a perfect straight line, this giant machine throws its intake ports wide open. It sucks energy directly from the Orion belt, channeling that cosmic flow along the conductive limestone structure, driving it deep underground. Dennis's vision was sucked inside. He didn't crawl through the dog hole that tourists squeeze through today. He walked through the main gate, and inside the Great Pyramid. Good God. It wasn't the dead, damp stone cave he knew from books. It was a living entity. It was vibrating. A low, continuous sound. A deep hum. Hum. Echoing endlessly. That wasn't the wind drafting. That was the hum of a high-voltage engine running on standby. The stone walls were not dark. They were faintly glowing. The hieroglyphs were not chiseled for decoration. They were optical circuits, blinking with data streams. Every corridor, every niche was part of a massive motherboard, designed to rectify the energy flow into the exact right positions. They reached the king's chamber. Forget what you know about the coldness of a tomb. This room was scorching with power. Torches were blazing, but not for illumination. They were catalysts ionizing the air. And the granite sarcophagus? Not a tomb. It was a cocoon, a biological regeneration chamber. Inside lay an Egyptian man, about 30 years old. He wasn't dead. He was in suspended animation, eyes shut tight. Surrounding him were 5 giant Anunnaki. They were not praying. They were not casting spells. They were monitoring parameters. They were lab technicians adjusting a critical experiment. The guide's voice rang out, cold as a scalpel. This is a pharaoh candidate. But to rule, mortal blood is insufficient. He needs an upgrade. 3 days and 3 nights in this isolation chamber, severing all senses, allowing the pyramid's vibrational frequency to invade and rewrite cellular structure. Rewrite? Dennis asked, his scientific curiosity surging. What the hell is actually happening? Not magic, Dennis. It is quantum biology. Dennis's vision zoomed into the extreme. He passed through skin, going straight into the microscopic level. He saw the double helix DNA of that man. But something was changing. "Look," the alien instructed. "You humans call it junk DNA because you are too stupid to understand its function. It's not junk. It is locked code. It is dormant potential." A specific sound frequency rang out. 432 hertz, nature's ping. Under the impact of this frequency, the junk DNA sequences suddenly woke up. They lit up like neon lights, self-repairing, self-reconnecting. The pineal gland in the center of the brain, which in modern humans has calcified into a useless rock, began to vibrate violently. The calcium shell shattered. It beat thumping like a second heart. The third eye opened. Not a literary metaphor. It was an expansion of the brain's bandwidth. The initiated one could now see, hear, and feel wave frequencies beyond the normal light and sound spectrum. The vision returned to the stone room. The man in the coffin opened his eyes. Dennis shuddered and stepped back. Those were no longer human eyes. His irises glowed metallic gold, emitting an inner light. He sat up. No wobbling, no weakness. He stood up with the power of an apex predator. The energy field around his body was so strong it made the surrounding air ripple. The 5 Anunnaki nodded in approval. The surgery was a success. The new pharaoh opened his mouth. Not ancient Egyptian. He spoke in the language of the stars, the language of the engineers. With the booming voice of a god freshly cast from the mold, the new pharaoh spoke. His voice echoed like rolling thunder, yet remained as calm as a flat lake surface. I see everything. The past is memory, the future is probability, and the present is an endless flow. I see the energy grid circulating through every single speck of dust." He turned to face the 5 giant Anunnaki, without a shred of fear or subservience in his posture. "And you are not gods. You are elder brothers, forerunners showing the way." The Anunnaki didn't need blind worship. They needed the respect of peers. Dennis realized the shocking truth. The real pharaohs of history weren't rulers by bloodline or luck. They were artificial superhumans. Their power wasn't magic. It was optimized biology. They were the ones who survived the brutal recasting process that would drive normal men mad or burn them alive within minutes. They ruled not with whips or fear. They ruled through absolute superiority in intellect and spirit. They were living lighthouses, great teachers guarding the flame of knowledge until the civilization's dying day. "Why?" Dennis asked, his voice full of regret. "If this technology is so amazing, why not activate everyone? Why only reserved for the elite?" The alien replied, tone somber. "We tried, Dennis. In the early centuries, we opened the activation chambers to anyone willing. But it was a disaster. Most of humanity wasn't ready. The hardware, body, was sufficient, but the software, mind, was too weak. Their consciousness shattered under the pressure of omniscience. They went mad. Power without spiritual maturity, it's like handing a pulled pin grenade to a monkey. That's why the temple system was born. They weren't religious sites. They were preparatory schools. Humans had to learn ethics, discipline, and self-control for decades. Only the most excellent, those with diamond minds, were allowed into the pyramid for the upgrade. Protecting humanity meant not hiding knowledge, but preventing the unqualified from self-destructing. Dennis's vision fast-forwarded. Time passed like a breeze. The Anunnaki left. The guardians of knowledge aged and died. The pure bloodlines faded. Knowledge fragmented. What was once precise science degenerated into hollow ritual. Then came the Dark Ages. Invaders. Persians, Greeks, Romans. barbarians with swords. They didn't just occupy land. They burned libraries. They slaughtered the high priests, the last technicians who knew how to operate the machinery. The golden capstones were pried off and melted down. The white limestone casing was stripped to build mundane temples and houses. The pyramids stood naked. From glistening quantum machines, they became jagged piles of rock, physically castrated. But the energy core remained. Even operating at minimum capacity, it still beat. Dennis saw the modern era. Tourists, people in shorts, wearing cameras, wandering aimlessly around the base of the towers, laughing, taking selfies. They didn't know what they were standing next to, but... "Look closely," the alien whispered. Not all were numb. Some. They left with something different. Not in their heads, but in their energy fields, their DNA vibrating faintly. The machine is still leaking energy. Even destroyed, its remnants are strong enough to gently trigger the dormant genes of sensitive individuals. They returned home, and their lives changed. Synchronicities appeared. Intuition sharpened. A quiet awakening spread across the world, originating from these seemingly harmless trips. "Why?" Dennis asked again, this time about the structure's existence. Why build something so eternal? Why not just teach and leave? The alien looked straight into Dennis's eyes, a gaze holding insight that cut through time. Because the Anunnaki knew they would have to leave, and they knew humanity would forget. They needed to leave behind a backup hard drive that couldn't be erased, couldn't be burned, and couldn't be forgotten. The Earth Project had an expiration date, Dennis. The Anunnaki knew that well. They knew humanity would fall into a dark age, a period of collective amnesia lasting millennia. But they also made a massive gamble, that eventually you monkeys would wake up, and when you wake up, you will need tools. The alien slapped his hand against the cold stone wall. Paper will rot, wood will decay, digital data will evaporate. Only stone is eternal. The pyramid is an indestructible hard drive designed to withstand every catastrophe: nuclear war, earthquakes, floods, and even human stupidity. It sits there, stoic, patiently waiting for you to become smart enough to read the user manual. Dennis asked, voice full of hope. "So, does it still work, right now?" "Of course," the grey giant nodded, "although it is running in low power mode. The white limestone casing, the insulation and optical conductor, has been stripped. The golden capstone, the main transceiver, has been removed. The circuits are open. Efficiency has dropped to 20%. But 20% of Anunnaki technology is still enough to blow your minds. The structural core still resonates at 432 Hz. It still silently amplifies intention. It still sneakily triggers the pineal glands of sensitive tourists. It is still working, Dennis, even while covered in scars." The vision expanded to a panoramic view of Egypt. Don't look at Egypt as scattered ruins. Look at it as a giant motherboard. The pyramid is the CPU. The Sphinx is the firewall protecting the data. The Nile is not just water. It is the wire, the cooling system, and the energy purifier. The temples along the river are charging stations, each one healing and calibrating a specific part of the soul. A journey down the Nile is not tourism. It is a soul maintenance procedure. Dennis trembled. Gratitude surged, mixed with bitter resentment. He was right. For 40 years, he was the only sane person in the insane asylum called academia. But he couldn't prove this to the people who fired him. He could only testify to those willing to listen. "Show me more," Dennis pleaded. "Take me back to the starting point." And time rewound, faster, further. Dennis stood before the Sphinx, but good God, it wasn't the old, eroded cat that the world sees. It was brand new, freshly carved. "Welcome to 10,500 BC, the guide's voice rang out. Thousands of years before laying the first brick of the pyramid, the Anunnaki planted this flag. The Sphinx lay there, proud, sharp. The nose was perfect. Forget those nonsense stories about Napoleon's cannons. And that face. Dennis squinted. Modern scholars argue whether it's Pharaoh Khafra or Khufu. They are all wrong. It wasn't the face of a king. It was an androgynous face, neither male nor female. A universal beauty, perfectly balanced. That is the archetype, the alien explained. It doesn't represent an individual. It represents humanity. That is the goal you must strive for. And the lion body. He pointed to the rippling muscular mass crouching on the ground. That is the animal nature, the wild instinct. Look closely at that beast, Dennis. The alien pointed at the giant lion body crouching on the ground. That is not just an animal. That is your ego. Survival instinct, lust, primal rage, raw, insane animal power. That is phase 1 of evolution, where 99% of humanity is stuck, thrashing in the mud. And the human head, he pointed up to the serene, majestic face. That is awakened consciousness, reason, compassion, absolute self-control. That is phase 2, where intellect controls instinct. A realm very few of you ever reach. Dennis nodded, grasping the profound meaning. The Sphinx wasn't a grotesque patchwork. It was a lesson carved in stone. Evolution isn't killing the beast inside, Dennis. Suppression is stupid. A caged beast will snap its chains and eat you alive. The lesson here is domination. Turn the lion into a mount. Let instinct serve the spirit, not the other way around. When you do that, you become the pharaoh of yourself. You rule your inner kingdom, and only then are you qualified to step into the pyramid for the final initiation. Dennis's vision drifted lower, hovering around the giant front paws of the Sphinx. A burning question burst out. Between those paws, Edgar Casey spoke of a secret room. Was he making it up? The alien smirked, if that mouth could smirk. Casey was a good receiver, even if sometimes there was static. He was right. Dennis's vision penetrated thick limestone like passing through fog. It was there. A small but real vault. No mummies, no Hollywood-style treasure. The walls were panelled with a strange metal, shimmering like mercury but harder than diamond. On stone pedestals lay metal tablets engraved with spiraling characters that Dennis, a doctor of ancient languages, was completely blind to. Not hieroglyphs, not Sumerian cuneiform. It was older. It was the language of the gods. And crystals. Good God. Perfectly geometric crystal blocks glowing on their own, casting eerie blue light. What is written there? Dennis asked, heart pounding like war drums. The entire history of Earth before the Great Flood wiped everything out, the alien replied, voice heavy with memory. Civilizations that rose and fell before you even knew how to use fire. Atlantis is not a myth, Dennis. It was real. A superpower in the mid-Atlantic, with technology rivaling the Anunnaki. But those fools committed suicide, war, ambition for power without wisdom. When that island sank 12,000 years ago, the Anunnaki decided they had to do something. They couldn't let the data be lost forever. They built this vault, complete records, encryption technology, star maps locating the origin, all sealed with energy, waiting for humanity to mature. Why not open it right now? Dennis snapped. We need it. The world is going mad. The alien shook his head. The lock isn't a physical key, Dennis. It is a frequency lock. Every attempt to drill, Every intention to intrude with greed or ignorance will be immediately repelled by the Anunnaki energy field. That door only opens when humanity's collective consciousness reaches a minimum vibration level. Edgar Cayce was right about the location, but wrong about the time. He guessed the 90s. Too soon. You were still busy with war and television garbage back then. But now, he looked at Dennis meaningfully. It's coming. Very close. Maybe 5 or 10 more years. You are waking up faster than expected. The vision left the Sphinx, shooting east, along the coiling Nile River. Dennis looked down at the river. Before, to him, it was just a squiggly blue line on a geographical map. But through the eyes of this entity, he saw the truth. It was a pulsing artery. Don't be naive, Dennis, the alien sneered. The Anunnaki didn't choose Egypt for the pretty plateau. They chose this place for the flow. The Nile is not natural. It is custom built. It is programmed. He pointed down into the deep riverbed. Beneath that mud, deep where modern human drills can never reach, are massive crystal blocks. They are transmitters. They program the molecular structure of the water for a single purpose: healing and purification. Memory of water? Don't listen to those half-baked scientists calling it pseudoscience. It is basic quantum physics. Water is a liquid hard drive. It stores information as vibration. And this entire Nile River is humming at the frequency of regeneration. Dennis's vision shifted to the present. A group of tourists, New Age spiritual seekers, were wading into the Nile at a quiet bend near Luxor. Dennis squinted. He saw what the naked eye could not. Invisible surgery. The moment the water touched their skin, their energy fields, auras, reacted violently. Dark patches, psychological trauma, pain from this life or past lives, began to dissolve like salt in hot water. They cried, not out of sadness. They cried from relief. They were shedding invisible boulders that had crushed their souls for centuries. Dennis saw chakras that were previously blocked now spinning like well-oiled turbines. Why? Dennis asked, astonished. What is the mechanism? Magic? Chemistry, Dennis. Don't think the Anunnaki just scattered these temples on the map randomly like sprinkling salt, the alien sneered. This is a technological assembly line, a sequential process. You can't install the operating system before you install the processor chip. You have to follow the roadmap. Dennis looked down. He didn't see romantic ruins for wedding photo shoots. He saw massive broadcasting stations. Each temple was vibrating violently with a distinct frequency, a specific spectral color. Station 1, Temple of Isis at Philae. A small island amidst the water, isolated and silent. Isis is the motherboard, the guide explained. She represents the universal feminine energy. Magic here isn't waving a wand. It is the ability to materialize intention. This temple is the debug station. It is designed to repair humanity's most damaged hardware, the trauma of the feminine, suppression, abuse, the devaluation of intuition. Millennia of toxic patriarchy have installed malware into the DNA of both men and women. Stepping in here triggers a full system virus scan. Dennis saw a group of modern women inside the temple. They were collapsing, sobbing in uncontrollably heaving breaths. Not out of weakness. Look, the alien pointed. That is pressure being vented. That pain isn't theirs alone. It is genetic pain. Of their grandmothers, great-grandmothers, ancestors. All being purged at once. A massive data wipe. Station 2, Temple of Horus at Edfu. The grandest structure, the most intact. Horus, the falcon, the all-seeing eye. The alien's voice hardened. This is the radar calibration station. This temple cures blindness. It resets the target acquisition system. Dennis observed a man meditating in a dark corner. Suddenly, he snapped his eyes open. No grogginess. Those eyes were shining like headlights. He turned to his friend, whispering but solid as a driven nail. I see it. I see my life's entire mission. I know what the hell I was born to do. Not deduction. It was a direct data download. The third eye had been forcibly activated by the temple's frequency. He was no longer a lost sheep. He had become a guided missile. Station 3, Temple of Hathor at Dendera, famous for the zodiac sealing. This is the resonance chamber, the alien shrugged. Hathor doesn't teach asceticism. She teaches the physics of vibration. Joy, music, dance. That's not entertainment. That is how you push your vibrational frequency to the max. This temple is the antidote for the human disease called depression. It activates every chakra simultaneously using resonant acoustic technology. Dennis's jaw dropped. A group of people were chanting, or rather, creating resonant sound. The sound Om echoed, hitting the stone walls, bouncing back, and amplifying 100-fold. The participants were laughing, dancing, falling into ecstasy. No drugs needed, just pure sound frequency. Spirituality isn't about groaning in suffering, the alien said. High frequency is love and laughter. Suffering is low frequency. Want to ascend? Crank the volume of joy to the limit. Station 4, Temple of Osiris at Abydos, the holiest sanctuary, the final destination of death and rebirth. Osiris, the god of the reset, the alien whispered with reverence. This is where you face the final big boss, the fear of death. This temple cures the attachment to the meat sack ego. It is the connection port to the root server. It shows you that death is just an administrative procedure to switch states of existence. When you walk out of here, you no longer fear death, and a man who fears no death cannot be governed.